Today, Daniel and I, both OO engineers, decided to show you a few things in OO. Without further information, let's take a look on the agenda. So we want to tell you a few things as an overview of what was delivered recently. Then we'll dig in a little bit on the OO 1080 version. You'll get to understand a few things about the OO Designer, the 1.0 version that was recently released. We'll show you Maestro, the OO Bot 1.00 that you are able to find in the item marketplace. We'll talk about recent content, out-of-the-box content that was promoted as well in the marketplace. As you are always used to, we'll do a demo. And afterwards, feel free to pose your questions and we'll try to answer as much as possible. Of course, feel free to interrupt during the call for any questions that you have. I would suggest to pose open questions verbally. Don't hesitate to do that. And let's have it as interactive as possible. Okay, that being said, let's proceed to the OO overview. So on this particular slide, we decided to pinpoint a few things. Those things mentioned here are in regard to the central designer and Chatops changes that were implemented. Now, the first thing worth mentioning is the system notification. The system in notification mechanism that was implemented and brought as a new feature in the central, in the OO 1080 central. You'll learn more about it in the upcoming slide. It's basically today based on email notification, and you are able to do a lot of things. I will highlight more later. We also introduced changes in the designer. One of the change that is worth mentioning is the fact that starting 1.20 version of the designer, you'll have a debugger capability. That means that if you will want to run your flows in the designer itself, you'll be able to do that. We also introduced in these recent versions IDM support. Now the IDM support comes, the identity management support comes as a feature for both central and designer, with the remark that designer has it as the only option to make it work. So you will need to have an embedded IDM service that will allow you to use the designer, and we'll get to learn more about it in the upcoming slides. We have brought a few enhancements on what we call simplified authoring, and this is kind of related to the designer itself. I don't want to mention more things right now. You'll see when we get there. It's all designer related. Due to IDM support implementation, but not only, also due to designer itself implementation, we enhanced the installer. Now we have an installer for the designer itself. We also have enhanced capability in the installer to be able to install the embedded IDM service that I mentioned before. We also decided to have a RAS-based installer. This is a lightweight version of the original installer. It is capable to install the RAS for those who will quickly need to do that. Licensing mechanism. This is more related to those who will end up consuming the OO in suites, but I think it's worth mentioning today as well. It's a licensing mechanism based on features, and one of the features that was affected by this is the system notification. I will explain more in the upcoming slides. Last but not least, Maestro 1.0 was already released in the marketplace, and we'll see it running in the demo today with a lot of cool features for you to play with. Okay, this is the overview on the central designer and Chatops. I would like to say a few words on the content changes, on the out-of-the-box content. So there were a few things done on the content. One, a few of the existing content packs were updated, and I'm talking here about VMware updates that were done in the virtualization CP. I'm talking about Google Cloud Platform introduction and Amazon EC2 updates that were done in the cloud CP. But I'm also talking about Docker, for instance, content pack that was um, from now on supported, that is now from now on supported as out-of-the-box content. It was originally community content or present as content in CSA capsules. Now you will have out-of-the-box content for Docker. We'll talk more later. So I'm talking also about new content like efficient IP1 that was brought to life, F5, big IP, Foreman, NetBackup, OpenNetAdmin, and Zabbix. All of these are since a few months already present in the marketplace and available to be consumed from OO, but not only OO, even from CSA, because they are present in capsules. We'll talk more about the out-of-the-box content as well. Some of you might have noticed, I didn't put that into slides, but I think it's worth mentioning that a few of the community content have been recently updated. That was done as part of some rebranding that we had in place. So if you saw different versions from community for some community content packs, keep in mind that those were done as part of rebranding changes that we performed. Okay, pretty much this is it about the overview. Let me know if you have any questions. I will not be able to take a look on any written ones, so I will continue to go over the slides until we reach the demo. If there aren't any questions, let me get into more details around OO 1080. And let me start by first mentioning a few things about the standalone RAS installer. As I mentioned, we have this since OO 1080. It's a lightweight installer. It contains only the RAS. It will be pretty easy for you to promote it to any RAS machines. You'll be able to install RASes in no time. As I mentioned, we introduced IDM integration. And as part of that IDM integration, you'll see changes in the installer. So if you are going to create new environments, and you'll see the options of create IDM service or connect to an existing IDM service. Keep in mind that this is related to the changes that we did in regard to the identity management system that we introduced. So we have the ability to create an identity management system, which is basically embedded as a service in the product. We also have the ability to connect to an identity management system with the relevant options in the installer as well. One small remark for those of you reaching to IDM and playing with IDM. When you'll do that, you'll end up having authentication enabled by default, and several users assigned by default in the IDM, as well as several roles like the system admin, end user, everybody, administrator, and promoter. Now, the IDM itself, for those of you already having product, of course, in production, is not something supported as of an upgrade. So if you will take the upgrade bits and upgrade your existing version, you will still have the existing functionality. So what I'm mentioning here around IDM is not going to affect you. This is just for newly built environments. Okay, one other aspect that I mentioned before and is worth digging into it around OO is the system notification that we introduced. The system notification allows you to get notifications over email. It's a setting that you can control over a central interface. You have as well API. You are able to provide mail server details and decide which kind of notifications to have. For the first version, for this particular version, OO 1080, we have introduced two types of notifications for whenever central authentication becomes disabled, and for whenever flows keep running more than an expected time frame, which you can easily set. It's in hours, so you can decide which time frame suits best for you, and you'll get some notifications, as I mentioned, over email. Now the notifications have a default customized template, and when you'll get the email, it will look something like this: authentication disabled alert, which is a warning, and flow execution alert. You are advised to go into operations orchestration and take the necessary actions. Of course, understand, for instance, why the flow has not completed, or understand who did the actual changes based on the audit mechanism that we also have in place. Pretty much this is it. Pretty cool, and I will emphasize this during the demo. Okay, what else is worth mentioning? If you don't like or if you feel like you need to change the default template for the notifications, you can do that. It's not something that we support based on a UI interface. It's something that you can easily control if you go to the central installation notifications folder under the configuration folder. Without explaining too many things, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Whatever goes in there, you have HTML for each kind of notification samples, and you'll figure it out once you get there. Okay, just keep in mind you can control the way the notifications look like. Okay, I've been mentioning before about the new licensing model. Again, I will emphasize that this pretty much goes well if you are consuming OO through the suites that we have, the ACM suite, for instance. But still, if you bump into a message like the one that you see here on the left side, HP Operations Orchestration Enterprise Edition with limited functionality, keep in mind that this will block you, for instance, from using system notifications, because system notification is a feature that is based on this licensing, feature-based licensing model. Again, if you are having license applied on our environment and you are upgrading to 1080, you are not affected by this. You'll be able to play with the system notification at hand. Okay, I think pretty much this is it on top of the licensing. Let's move on. On the support matrix, a few changes have been brought there, like the support for Windows 2016, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server, and the fact that we upgraded to OpenJDK 180.141. Another thing one was mentioning is the fact that when you will from now on install product with Oracle, the JDBC driver is required to be provided with the option that is highlighted here in the attached screenshot. Okay, I guess I'm through with the support metrics. I will move along to the OO Designer 1.2.0. As I mentioned before, IDM integration was not was not a change brought only to the central. It was a change that we implemented for the designer. The designer requires this IDM integration to make it work. So during the designer installation, you will need to either choose to create an IDM service if you don't have one yet, or to connect to an IDM service. The installer itself is pretty self-explanatory. In the, let's say, best case scenario, in the event you already have a central install with IDM, then the best practice would be to install Designer and connect to the existing IDM service. This is what we would recommend. Of course, if you don't have central on IDM, then pretty much choose to create the IDM service when creating the installer, the designer, sorry. Okay, one aspect worth mentioning about IDM, and in particular in regard to whenever you have designer installed with the create option of IDM, is that you will require an IDM related database, an IDM related schema. actually. So you can, one thing you need to keep in mind is that this needs to be um, schema that exists on your server, on a database server. So make sure you have it before running the installer. Okay, I've been mentioning a few things about IDM, but I didn't mention about what you can do, or once you install Designer with IDM, what do we offer? So one aspect or one thing we offer, apart from this identity management service, is the fact that you have the ability through the IDM admin to control the users that will be able to log into the Designer. I will show you during the demo. I hope I will have time to do that. How easy you can get access to the IDM admin once you have an designer installed, and how easy it is to add users that will be able to log in to your designer. Okay, an important addition that we brought to designer is the debugger. The debugger we all know is a feature that is very helpful for the workflow authors. You often bump into the need of being able to troubleshoot flows that have been reported to work erroneously on production, or even during the authoring time you want to debug your flows. So for that you have now the debugger in designer. It's on the right side of the product, as you can see here, and it gives you the ability to test the flows that you have into designer. I will give you more context later during the demo. It has a few things worth mentioning. Well, first it has the run tree. So you are able to see the flow either in real time or after you debugged it, and you are able to select steps as you were used to in the desktop studio. There are a few icons as explained here that will emphasize on the exact step or flow result. So it will be pretty easy to understand if it was a success, failure, something was cancelled, or so on. It also has a context inspector. Um, apologize. While you are able to select on particular flow steps, run steps, you are also able to understand which inputs, outputs, and flow variables change and their exact value, so you'll be able to properly debug your flows. As I mentioned before, we brought a few things and a few changes into Designer as part of the simplified authoring. So we try to keep things as simple as possible, as minimal as possible, to provide the exact value uh, needed. As part of this simplified authoring, we decided to introduce the Canvas context menu. So now when you are going to use Designer from now on, you'll be able to edit your flows, and if you will right click on any step or any canvas, you'll be able to take actions. Now the actions that you are able to take, of course, are the ones based on the context, and in pretty much are similar to the ones that you are able to, or you were able to take from the toolbar as well. It's a pretty cool feature I will try to highlight during the demo as well. Another change that we brought was in regard to the deployment to central. So for those of you who already played with the designer, I just want to mention that designer was released as part of CSA 4.8. So some of you got the chance to play with it. We had this deployment to central since back then, but what we introduced right now is the ability to provide all central credentials. So from now on, if you are deploying to central and you are using HTTPS URL, you'll be required to provide credentials for the deployment. And once you do that, everything should work smoothly and you'll be able to deploy to that particular central. Of course, if authentication is not enabled on the central, you can simply skip these credentials themselves. Pretty much this is it on what I wanted to mention for the designer. Let me know if you have any questions. If not, I will try to move to the OO Bot 1.10 Maestro and say a few words about that. So we've prepared this slide for you just in order to provide a highlight of where exactly Maestro fits into, let's say, Chatops story. So we are seeing Maestro here, which is the OO Bot. We are also seeing collaboration tools, various collaboration tools that enable different personas, support, operators, developer, customers to sit together to act basically for the relevant and to be able to take the relevant action in the right time. So they sit in different collaboration tools like Slack, Mattermost, and Microsoft Teams. And from that, they are able to discuss with several bots. Now, for this discussion is the Maestro OO Bot. When you are talking with the Maestro OO Bot, you will also collaborate with the login server that we have in place, and I will show you during the demo. The login server is responsible to pass credentials, OO credentials to the bot, and the bot will actually pass those credentials to OO itself. So you are actually authenticating through the bot with your operations orchestration central. You are going to be authorized by the operations orchestration authorization mechanism, and you'll be able to take several operations orchestration actions that we will see in the upcoming slides. Okay, I hope it's clear where Maestro Bot fits into this story. As part of the supported metrics, keep in mind you will need to have Red Hat or CentOS to be able to deploy it. And just a quick overview of it. It provides basic server mechanism. You are able to provide username and password that will be passed to your OO endpoint. We are delivering RPM packages for both the bot and the login server. There is a conversational model support, meaning that you are able to write to the bot and he is able to respond and understand what you are doing, and I'll show you live what it means. And in terms of collaboration tools, you will be able to consume it through Slack or Mattermost or even Microsoft Teams, which currently is an early access phase, meaning that if you are going to download the 1.10 version of the bot that we have online, you are not able to actually use Microsoft Teams. But for particular cases, we can deliver that as part of, let's say, EPRs or early access bits. Okay, in terms of OO capabilities and what the bot can do, we have the ability to get flows from central, the ability, of course, to run flows, the ability to get specific run details, to cancel any runs, to monitor existing runs, or even related, some commands related to, let's say, central configuration or understanding your central environment itself, like the ability to get the central version, central topology, and even understand what kind of central content packs you have out there. A few of these commands will be highlighted during the demo, and I will skip the slide just to be able to leave enough time for the demo. Unless you have questions, as I mentioned, feel free to stop me. Yes, it's present in the marketplace, and sorry.
One mention: if you have any question, you can unmute yourself or raise the hand. Also, you have the chat available. If you want, you can put your questions there, and we'll try to answer them. That's all.
Okay. So we'll answer them afterwards. So thank you, Daniel. Chatops present in the marketplace. I provided a link here. There are a few blogs and videos. Feel free to watch them. A few things worth mentioning about the latest content. As I already mentioned, a lot of content was added and a lot of content was enhanced. Let's go over this content quickly. And at the very end of it, we'll do a demo. So VMware vSphere content was enhanced. It is present in the virtualization CP 1.11.0. We've highlighted here the supporting versions for it, and I guess the two things that are worth mentioning are the fact that this integration is based on the SOAP API, so keep in mind that, and it has base content pack and HP solutions 1.9x. Google Cloud Compute was introduced into the Cloud CP. So once you download Cloud CP 2.1, you'll be able to consume Google Cloud Compute stuff. You'll be able to basically manage instances, disks, and networks. It is based on the Java SDK from Google Cloud Compute Engine. It is secured and it only has base content pack dependency. Amazon Web Services, a few things were enhanced here. Keep in mind that this is in regard to EC2 platform. Things or changes were brought in terms of snapshots and instances. More details are to be found into the documentation. Again, the only dependency is the base content pack, as you are used to. In terms of Docker, as I mentioned, this is now out of the box supported. We recommend to use it as part of, and integrating with Docker version 17.03, even though there are several other supported versions. Keep in mind that it's both content pack or a CP design on REST API and SSH. So whenever you want to consume it, notice this difference and be able to consume those operations that allow you to alter or control images or containers and Docker Swarm and even more through the mechanism that you want, either REST API or SSH. Efficient IP was released for this supporting version of Efficient IP 5.6 or 5.6 or 6.5. SOAP API-based integration with the dependencies that are mentioned here. The F5 big IP, again, for the supported version of F5, it allows you to control a few things in regard to the big IP through the REST API operations that were designed. Foreman in the same area provides a baseline integration with Foreman. You are able to create and delete hosts and even interact with some Puppet classes that we have there. Just keep in mind it's Foreman's REST API v2 based integration. NetBackup as well. TCP is available to be used as long as you have the supported version 7.6.1. What else? Well, we have also OpenNetAdmin content pack, which is REST API based on dependency like base content pack and HP solutions. It allows you to control a few things like host and IP addresses and subnets. And last but not least, the Zabbix content pack that was released based on the REST API. Again, it allows you to interact with a few things in Zabbix. You are able to add hosts to be monitored by the Zabbix monitoring system. And we'll actually use one of the Zabbix out-of-the-box flows that were released in the demo today. Okay, I think pretty much this is it about the content. I didn't want to get into too many details because I wanted to leave time for demo. So let me move to the demo quickly. Let me just briefly double check how many questions there are in the system. Okay, I'm not sure, Daniel, where you mentioned that there are some questions, but you know what, guys? I will just start the
No,
demo.
yeah, I just said that the chat is available for questions. There are no any questions yet, but
Okay,
just
okay, I
I
get it.
wanted to
Thank you.
emphasize that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Then I misunderstood. Okay, so for the demo itself, I will start with this scenario because I want to showcase the OO notification system, for instance. So we'll start from the OO notification system and we'll move from this one to different components. So this is the one of the notifications that I got earlier today. So a few hours earlier today, I got these notifications from OO notification system. Then one of the flows there have been running for too much time, and this flow has been running for more than 1 hour. Now it is the 1 hour value that I set in the OO central. So I've been notified that I need to take a look on this flow and understand what happens with the flow and take the necessary actions, maybe even cancel the execution if necessary. So I'm recommended to search the execution in the Run Explorer, view it in the operation orchestration, and again, take necessary actions. Now, I will not move to the O Central. Again, this is the notification that I'm receiving by the new system notification mechanism. And what I will do, I will copy this execution ID, and I will move to Slack. And let me just see if I have it. Yes. So I will move to Slack, and here I will use Maestro, the bot that I mentioned earlier, to do some things with it around my central. So first, let me see. The notification email said monitor this run and understand what's happening. Now, because I got the email earlier, the first thing I'm wondering if this flow is really running as the email was saying. So I could do like Maestro, OO get run, and I could say, okay, give me details for this particular run. I want to understand what's happening with this run. Now, what Maestro is doing, he is saying, okay, I can do that, but you first need to log in. So now I'm accessing the link that I got provided, and I need to provide credentials. As I mentioned during the slides, this is the login server that we provide as the RPM package that you can install, and this is the login server that allows you to put OO credentials here that will be given basically to the bot, which will afterwards take it to the OO central and we'll do where the actual authentication and authorization will happen. So if I'm providing the right username and the right password, everything should be fine, and I should be prompting that, okay, sign in was successful. So sign in to OO was successful. I can close now this, and now I can return to my bot and run my command again. So now that I logged in, I can say, okay, give me the details now. I want to understand if this run is still running. So the bot is now answering with the credentials, with my credentials on behalf. So I'm getting whatever I should be able to see. So what I understand now is that the flow is still running indeed, as the notification system mentioned. I can understand which is the flow, which is the exact flow, who's the owner of the flow. I also understand what kind of inputs the flow used, like for instance this host. So I can also understand that is running on a current step, like wait for Java application deployment. Now, if I pretty much know about what kind of flows I have running in the environment or what kind of flows I run here, maybe I can understand now that it might be a problem for this flow running due to something on the particular host. So I could dig into more investigation and I could say, you know, Maestro, I want to do a quick health check on this particular host and understand a few things on that host because maybe something is fishy around that. It shouldn't wait for this Java application deployment for that long. It's running for several hours. So what I could do, I could say, Maestro, run this flow for me, health. I think it's health check. Well, of course, these are flows that I have deployed in the system. Well, yes, I got it through. So now what Maestro is doing is starting to have a conversation with me. So you saw the first time I triggered a command, it gave me the answer as soon as I was authenticated. Now it pretty much needs some information from me. So I'm able to, if I'm able to provide the required information to him, he's going to be able to run the flow. So let me say, you know, please get me health check on this host because I need to understand what happened. And Maestro will now run the flow. I can press this link and I will be actually redirected to my central. I'll not do that because I'll get all the answers that I need here. So let's take a look. What happens is that health check has been performed on my host. Some values maybe are above the threshold. I'm taking a look here and I can see that the disk is 100% full. So maybe this is the reason why it might be for sure the reason why the Java application was not deployed. I can do further things, of course, with Maestro without getting outside of it. I can run a flow, maybe add disk to
Run
my
flow.
host. Yes, run flow. Thank you, Daniel. I'm in a hurry because I want to finish the demo. Okay, so of course I can run this. I can provide the same host again. Now I'm prompted for 2 inputs. Let's keep this disk size, extra disk size to be added. This is actually the information that is retrieved from the flow. So if a flow author provided this information for the input, I can get this information to understand more about what this size is. So I can say yes, add an extra 40 giga to it. So Maestro will now run, will fix the flow. Of course, maybe the original flow that was problematic, I will need to cancel it. It doesn't really matter. I don't want to get there. What I want to show next is something else. I've been saying that we added a new content with Zabbix, for instance, and the Zabbix is allows you to monitor a lot of metrics on several hosts. So um, why not avoid reaching into all this kind of situation in which you have a running flow because of something on a host machine? So maybe I can monitor my host machine with Zabbix. So I have a Zabbix flow and I can say Maestro OO run flow, add host to Zabbix. Now, one thing that you observe here is the fact that the flow has been run, but the Maestro didn't ask me for any inputs. So now I'm wondering, okay, how do you know what host to add to Zabbix? Now the interesting part is now that the flow was run by Maestro, but he's also able to understand that the execution changed. Now the flow is paused because this is how the author designed the flow, and I'm able to provide a server name during the actual execution of the flow. Um, so let me provide the same host. Please add this one to Zabbix, and let me show you the Zabbix in the meantime. Um, yeah, hosts. Okay, so I have, for instance, Zabbix here. This is the list of hosts that I'm monitoring, and as soon as I'm running the flow, I should see my host added there as well. So from now on, let's say whenever a deployment application flow on a particular host will not finish due to disk size problem, I will actually know in advance because Zabbix will be able um, to notify me in advance. So if I refresh here, I should see my host here being monitored, and if everything goes wrong, I will be able to see that. Okay, pretty much concludes what I wanted to show you in Maestro, but now I still have a question. Now my flow, my original flow, the one that was reported over email, uh, is still running. So I fixed my problem. Now I wonder why is my flow running? If something is wrong with the disk size on a machine, the flow should be designed in such a way that after several, let's say, retries, it should halt or notify or do something, but it shouldn't remain running. So I could understand that maybe something is wrong with that particular flow. And this kind of gets me to where I want to be, which is actually I want to show you a little bit the designer. So let's get into the designer and see if we can spot the flow and alter the flow and see what we can do with the flow. This is the designer interface, operations orchestration designer. As you can see, the login and the entire login is done through the IDM service that I mentioned during the slides. I'm able to log in now to the designer. And before actually going and moving to the flow that I want to alter, let me just show you a few things of the designer if you didn't get the chance to play with it. Now the first one is the IDM admin that I mentioned. You have the ability through this button here to access the IDM admin. And once you get there, you'll be able to add users that will be able to consume this designer. Okay, it might take some time for it to load. You'll get to the database user here, and you'll be able to add relevant users with passwords, and those will be able to have their own workspace once they log into the designer. Okay, what else we have? As you are used to, we have the projects panel, dependencies panel, and the flow editor. I'm able to go to my flows. This is the deploy application flow that for some reason was problematic. As I mentioned before, there were a few additions brought to the designer, like the right click. Okay, so you can right click on particular items and you can do stuff like drill down if it's the case. You can drill down either for flows, like this icon shows you that we have a flow, or you can drill down for operations. This icon is for operations. You can do a lot of things. I don't want to get into too many details. You can debug. So let's not debug. What I was saying is that the flow kept running for several hours on a step which was called wait for Java application deployment. So maybe something was wrong here. Maybe someone defined it wrong. You can double click and start to investigate. Some things, of course, are easier to spot, some are not. I can spot that someone designed this flow as a loop, so it implied that maybe a retry needs to be done here, and it was designed to do a retry on a particular range. I can control the values, and I can easily understand for this particular case that maybe the range is too much. To do a loop of 50 times on this step, it might be too much. It's running for too much time. I could save it like, okay, let's do a loop of um, 4 steps. I can save my flow and I can easily debug my flow as an author. So I did a change. Now my steps should run. Let's see if it runs. I want to see if my changes are taking into consideration, if I'm able to run a flow. So now the actual deployment is doing, and it's waiting for the actual deployment to process, and if everything is okay, it should finish properly. So it didn't do uh, this step more than 4 times. even though an error was retrieved. So even you will have an error like, I don't know, this space or something like that, it will not continue more than the time frame. So let's say from an authoring based perspective, now I'm confident with the changes that I need to bring for the flow. Now I can easily deploy my changes to the central through the deploy as content back to central. I can pinpoint my actual central. So let me easily do that. I will say 101. This is my central. I need to provide a proper URL. And as I mentioned, credentials that were added in this version. And I can easily deploy. And once I do that, I will of course be able to consume my flow, my new version of the flow, the updated one. So let's just say I can go either in Maestro or I can go either in Central, cancel the current running flow and simply deploy the new version and have my application deployed properly. Pretty much this is it in terms of what I wanted to highlight for the demo today.